Hey
All right.
everyone, my name is Hallie Caldwell and I'm a member of the Quad Education team. I have two of our admissions counselors here with us today to talk about tackling common college interview questions. So we have Darryl and Dominique here. Darryl, can you give us a little introduction?
Sure. Hi, my name is Darryl Tiggle, and I'm one of the admissions counselors at Quad, and really excited to talk with you all today about college admissions interviews. I worked in college admissions for a long time, so I sat on the other side of the desk, interviewing young adults who are looking at the schools where I was working. So I think I have some pretty good insights and maybe even some old stories to share from my time.
Thanks, Darryl.
Welcome.
Excited to have you here. And Dominique, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. It's awesome to be here. Like Hallie said, my name is Dominique Dadakian, also an admissions counselor here at Quad. My background, my full-time job is working with students in public schools. So I have spent some time mentoring students and getting them across the finish line senior year with their college applications. But outside of that, I've actually worked, well, as an undergrad at Dartmouth College, I was working in the admissions office. And then as an alumni these past 5 years, I've had the chance to work with students interviewing prospective students as an alumni interviewer as well. So I can give a little bit of context as to what that process looks like kind of from behind the scenes of the alumni interviewer specifically.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for being here. I'm excited to have you both dive into this. So today we're going to cover what exactly college admissions interviews are, the purpose of them. We'll talk about the different types of interview questions you might face, and then we'll spend time going through examples and kind of workshopping answers to common questions. We'll go over some tips and tricks, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So if you have questions throughout this, feel free to pop them into the Q&A box, and we'll definitely spend time going through those at the end. All right, so an overview on what interviews are. Darryl, you want to dive in here?
All right, sure. I'll take care of the who and the what. How's that, Dominique? All right. So typically they'll be with an alumni, but it could be with a current student or an admissions committee member, someone who knows the school well. Bigger schools will rely on alumni because they can, have a wider net and use that network. Many schools rely on students because they really have the finger on the pulse of what it's like to be a student there. So it's a really good advocate for the school. The what, it's a conversation. It'll last anywhere from about 15 minutes to an hour, and I'd say short isn't bad, but probably, longer is better. It means you're probably getting along a little bit better. But yeah, it's going to be a two-way conversation where you're both being asked questions and will be, expected to have some questions of your own.
Yeah, and I could jump in. So the where, either virtual or in person. So depending on if you're interviewing with an admissions representative or an alumna, they may present you the option. They may ask you to come into the school to do a tour, and you would do it during your tour time. All the interviews that I've actually done have been virtual, and oftentimes they'll ask alumni to choose which regions they want to interview students from. So these past 4 years, I was living in Chicago, but I'm from New Hampshire, where Dartmouth is actually located, and I was really excited about getting local students, kind of excited about going to Dartmouth, and so I said, please give me students from New Hampshire. So I did all of my interviews remotely, but it can totally vary. And that's just kind of another thing to point out. You will oftentimes get an alumni that has shown interest in you in some way. You've been paired up because maybe you have the same major, or maybe you're from a similar region or something like that. So oftentimes that conversation should come pretty naturally because these people have already been matched with you for some specific reason. And then the when, typically during obviously that application cycle, so either in the fall or winter of your senior year of high school, depending on, of course, if you are applying earlier or applying regular decision, but you can expect that anywhere from between September and December.
Fantastic. And I know we don't really mention this here, but I know some schools, they generally interview as many candidates as possible. And other schools, sometimes you get matched with an interviewer and sometimes you don't. Can either of you give a little just a little insight into what if you don't get an interview? Can you request an interview?
Sure.
What does that look like?
Sure. Well, it kind of depends on school. So I've worked at everything from small liberal arts colleges where you can interview without having even applied, to the college yet, to I've worked at highly selective, bigger institutions where until you have submitted an application, you won't have the opportunity to interview. And then at many schools, the demand for interviews is such that it exhausts their ability to do so. So if a student would like an interview and it's a required part of the process, that's going to happen. If it's a situation where it's a recommended or a kind of a first come first serve type basis, it won't be necessarily a disadvantage to the student if they're not able to secure that interview. But what they can do to sort of mitigate that is really early in the process, sort of find out what schools might have an interviewing sort of schedule, and they'll let you know often by when you'll need to apply to best set yourself up to be able to have an interview. So let's try to, as we move forward with this work together, get ahead of those kind of things. But don't fret if you aren't given an interview at a place, because it's not always or often required. It's just an additional piece of information that can help your application.
Right.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that as a real life example, I actually didn't know when I was applying that Dartmouth had alumni interviews, which is probably good because I assume I would have freaked out that I didn't get one. But I did end up obviously getting in, and I had applied early decision, and I was super, super set on it. So what I've come to learn is that we will tap people who maybe their application, we are looking for a little bit more. We don't have a full picture of who the student is. And so they could be super set and sure on you, and that's why you didn't get an interview. So it's not necessarily, we're not interested, we didn't get an interview. So just keep that in mind, because I know that can be tough to hear, well, my friend applied and they got an interview and I didn't get one. Doesn't always mean it's not a good thing. It could be a very good thing. You could already be in the accept pile.
And same, it doesn't, if you do get an interview, it doesn't mean you're necessarily on the cusp for one.
Correct.
Fantastic. Let's talk about why interviews are important.
Dominique, you want to jump in this time?
Sure, I will take this one away. And so it is, I think, if you get an interview, best to take it if you can. Obviously, there are reasons why you may not be able to make it if they're asking you to go in person, but I would do everything you can to show up to that and make that work, because it can only positively impact your application. I think, this is the last bullet point, but it really does at the end of the day demonstrate your interest. If you are not making that effort to show up to the interview, you're not really showing that this is really, really what you want. So you want to have every feather in your cap when it comes to being able to say, this is the school I want to go to. Of course, bullet point number 2, an opportunity for the college to learn more about you as the student. This is a great way for you to just kind of like shine and be yourself, right? A lot of people on paper are a little bit potentially different than how they are in person, right? And so being able to show your personality and show the things you're interested in that don't necessarily neatly fit into the boxes on the common application or whatever application you're using, is just a great opportunity to provide a little bit more context. Number 3 would be to allow you to ask questions, again, demonstrating your interest, but also just, these are people that went to this school, right? If you are asking this, well, oftentimes, but if you are asking this alumnus, like what they liked about the school or what they've done, it's a good chance for you to get a real life perspective, right? Oftentimes the alumni are younger people as well who have just recently graduated, and they can tell you, exactly what it was like to be pre-med at Dartmouth, for example, in a case, or whatever specifically you're looking for. So it's just another, I guess it's another perspective outside of what you're seeing on paper, what you're seeing in the brochures on the website, etc. And then I already mentioned this, the more you can demonstrate your interest, the better. And then I think that this will be mentioned a little bit further on, but the more you can demonstrate your interest in that specific school. So not just, I want to be pre-med at a top 10 school, like I want to go to Dartmouth because this is what's unique about it. This is what stood out to me. And if you can speak to those things articulately in front of someone, that will make a really, really solid impression.
I agree. And the thing I often say about interviews, it's just like other things in life. You get to put a face to a name, right? You get to the thing that's on paper, right? You now get a chance to see who that person is. So I agree with all those points, and I really like the getting to know someone, demonstrating interest by showing your interest in person. Awesome.
Fantastic. All right, let's talk a little bit about how to prepare for your interviews.
All right. I'll dive in on this one. All right. Do your research, right? Know about the school and its offerings. Like Dominique said, it's important, right, for them to know that you want to study pre-med or you want to be an engineer, but be able to articulate why the program at their school, right, resonates with you. Bring questions to ask, right? Remember, it's a two-way conversation, and it's an opportunity for you to learn more about the school. And like in other, settings, sometimes when you're right, in the mix, talking to the people that are living that life, right? The insights that you can get are going to be maybe more complete than you get on the website or in publications. Have an idea of what your interviewer might ask you, right? Know the most common interview questions, and we'll go ahead with that. But kind of know that if you've articulated that you're an international relations major, they might ask you something about what's going on in the world of politics, right? Or if you've mentioned another type of leaning in terms of your academic or personal life, they might want to follow up and dig deeper into that to get to know more about your interest. Practice speaking and answering questions, and get used to speaking in front of people and formatting your answers so that you're ready to deliver a cogent and eloquent response. But also just so that you have some practice sort of answering the where you're from, where you're going, and why that school will sort of fit into your plan. And that's kind of how I tell students to prepare for an interview. I say it's kind of a 3-chapter, right, conversation. They want to know where you're from, right? Who you are, tell us about your family, tell us about your school, tell us about your life. They want to know where you want to go, like sort of, kind of what you want to major in, kind of what you want to do as a job, but sort of what kind of life you want to live. And then how their institution will help you get to where you want to go is how I tell students to kind of prepare their mind for the conversation.
That's some great tips. Dominique, do you have anything to add here?
I would say, as far as like the practicing, and again, we'll go into this a little bit further too. There's millions, if you can Google this, right? There's like millions of sample questions on the internet for college applications, jobs, right? You can go through these things. At the end of the day, I wouldn't script it or polish it up too much. I think that there's something to be said about being a human being as well. And so if you feel like you are in that interview, and you get a question and you are kind of taken aback, it's also okay to just say, can I have a minute to think about that? I didn't expect that. Great question. It's better to be honest than to pretend to be perfect. And so I think that's, practice is great and important. But I wouldn't put too much stake in like being this perfect, robot of a person. Like, be a person. That would be kind of my 2 cents there.
I like that advice. All right. Let's talk a little bit about common question types.
All right. So we have 6 of them listed here, and we're going to dive into each of these a little bit more deeply, just with some examples and some ways that you can prepare to answer any of these types of questions. We already spoke about a few of these, but basically we have persona questions. This is, again, the who are you, where do you come from, what is your family like, etc. Interest related, maybe about academics, extracurriculars, what you want to do in college, just kind of like, why are you applying to this school? What do you hope to study? What do you hope to get out of this experience? School specific questions that will ask about, why, again, you're specifically interested in that school. And this will take some preparation and time specifically for each school. You're not going to be able to just prepare for one interview and then just throw the same answers at each interviewer. It's, just like with college essays, this is the advice I give students. You really need to throw in those specific kind of data points or, programs that you're interested in, or just things about the campus that really excite you. weaknesses and strengths. This is kind of just like a general job interview type of question. What is your biggest weakness? What is your biggest strength? So definitely think on, who are you as a person? What would your friends say about you? What would your parents say about you? What would your teachers say about you? Really start to think about the way you are being perceived in the world and the way you work on teams. Because at the end of the day, self-aware people are people that are going to be successful, especially in this process. Future related. How do you picture your future? How do you picture your goals? This does not have to be perfectly tailored. You don't need to know for sure. Again, I keep using pre-med because I was pre-med. Little secret, I didn't end up being pre-med forever. So I went in like, I'm pre-med, I'm going to be a doctor. I was that person, but it is totally fine to also just say, I don't know. I'm interested in X, Y, and Z. I'm interested in these specific programs that I saw at your school. I'd love to explore them more. That's totally fine as long as there's a rationale and also a demonstrated interest. Definitely don't go into the interview saying, I want to graduate and become an astronaut and you've never taken one science class, right? That's an extreme example. But being able to just say, here's what I've done. I have limited experience. I've tested the waters and here's what I'm interested in doing is totally fine. It doesn't have to be this like picture perfect 5-year plan. And then the tell me about a time questions are always fun. So definitely this is one that I would look up some examples and we'll go over some examples here and just kind of have some answers ready. A time you struggled, a time you failed, a time you succeeded, all of those different things. Just really good to have those in your back pocket. Darryl, anything to add?
I think you got them. Let's see what we got next. That was you covered them all. That's awesome.
And then I think it's important to specify here too, you're probably going to get questions that fall into multiple categories here. They're not, interviewers aren't looking at like, here's the types of questions we can answer. We're going to check all of them. All right, so persona questions.
All right. Tell me about yourself, right? Tell me about your family and your background. I often group these together, right? And these are the things I was talking about before. Tell them where you're from, right? And people want to know, the context of your school, your life experience. So, share with them, again, very much like Dominique said, like your essay does. This gives them a time to sort of see in person the kind of things you're articulating in your essay. Who would you consider as your role model, right? The kind of people that you associate yourself with or aspire to be can give an interview or insight into the kind of person that you might be already or trying to be. The places you'd like to, your favorite places to be, your favorite books, your favorite movies. These are things that you're choosing to do with your precious time, right? Where you put your feet, where you spend your time, right? Movies and books, and they're the thing that I'm someone whose attention is very short. So when I commit myself to a movie or a book, it is something I'm super interested in. So that says something about me. I like biopics, apparently. Those are the kind of movies I like, right? But being able to articulate to someone, these are things about me that you should know that aren't all of who I am, but they give you some insight into my persona, right? And then how would you describe yourself to someone who doesn't know you? And that's essentially what you're doing in the interview, right? You're meeting someone for the first time. And one of the things I like to say as quad admissions consultants, we're agents and we're super good at it. Like we get to know you and we tell the world, how wonderful you are, but we also want you to become your own, best self-advocate. So we want you throughout this process, not just when you're interviewing and writing essays, but sort of think about who you are, how you like to present yourself, and be able to articulate it, right? And it doesn't have to be, super complex, but something that gives people an authentic and comprehensive understanding of who you are. Think about how you'd like to describe and present yourself.
And I think we dive into this question a little bit more here too. Dominique, gonna add in some details from this and other thoughts that you have.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that, one thing that I've learned in my experience being an alumni interviewer and working with Quad is the value of this question. As quad admissions counselors, we spend a lot of time at the beginning of our work with any student, regardless of when they enter in, if they enter in the 9th grade for early candidacy development, or if they enter in as a junior, getting right into that application season, doing extensive interviewing and just talking about, everything from the, tell me about your family, tell me about where you grew up, what do you want to do with your life, all of those things and all the things in between, to really give students a set of keywords, I would say, a set of keywords that they can really fall back on as to these are the things that describe me. Here is, the reason why AP biology was my favorite class is actually because I just love learning about how systems work, right? And I love learning about how things are organized from, a higher level or something like that. It takes a little bit of prodding to understand that, yes, you're interested in biology, but this tells you a lot more about who you are, the reason why this was your favorite class. And so it's little things like that, being able to dive in and just kind of, do that work of either asking yourself those questions or hopefully working with one of us and having us ask you those questions, and then being able to really synthesize it down into, here are the things about myself that I have now learned. Because it's really, really tough. We know the things we like, we know the things we've been through, but we very rarely, I think, sit down and really say, what does this say? What kind of narrative can I write about myself? So definitely important to do that work and really distill it down so you feel like you have something kind of ready to go. And you have some keywords and key traits to fall back on.
Great. Darryl, anything else to add here?
Yeah, I'd like to say that at the beginning, it sounds like sort of an uphill climb, describing yourself and, putting it out there. But I've got to tell you how empowering and refreshing it is when you find that muscle memory to start telling people, this is who I am, this is what I'm interested in, this is what you need to know about me. It is super fun. It is super fun. So we're going to get there together, and I just thought I'd add that. It is, it's part of the journey that I just love.
Great addition. All right, interest related questions.
All right, interest related, and for obvious reasons, right? Your interest, and all of these things that we're talking about in the interview, they better describe who you are, I think, than your grades and possibly your test scores and other things that are more sort of often thought about being the most important things, but who you are and what you're interested in are super important to admissions people. So the things they'd like to know, what's your favorite school subject and why, right? It might coincide with what you want to study, but it might coincide with what your passion is. It gives them insight into what type of scholar you are. What's your least favorite subject and why, right? And that also gives insight. And one of the things I tell my students to not do, don't say foreign language, right? Because colleges want you to study abroad, right? They want you to be a global citizen. So, yeah, but think about, why you don't like a subject or why you love it, and be able to articulate it. How do you usually spend your free time? And I think and I've said this before, I'll hang out or I don't do this. I don't play video games, right? I might watch movies. But with your free time, even if that's what you do, they mean, what do you do with your free time when you want to be productive, right? And productive might be reading, it might be video games, right? But lead into how you choose to use your free time productively, right? And all of us should have some leisure, but I think they want to know what you're doing, what you're producing in your free time. What's your favorite extracurricular activity and why? And again, it might coincide, it might overlap with what you want to study, right? You might want to be an engineer and robotics is your favorite extracurricular activity, right? It doesn't necessarily have to dovetail like that. But again, they're trying to find out things that give them insight into what you do with the time that you own and how you make choices, right? And then what major are you interested in pursuing? And they're probably going to want to know why. And if you don't have a major yet, if you're undecided, that is not a crime, right? Because many people commit the crime of having a major decided and then immediately changing it upon, taking the intro course in that particular discipline. So talk about what you'd like to study if you don't have a particular major in mind, or if you have a major that you've already decided is kind of your calling, be able to provide them some insight into why that subject area interests you. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that I want to study political science because I want to be a lawyer, right? It might be because I'm super interested in the way that the world is spinning right now, so I think I should know how politics works. Right? That's it.
So this kind of dovetails off of that very nicely. Dominique, you want to dive in here a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I covered a lot of this earlier. And so I just kind of want to highlight again, totally okay if you don't know. And if you do know, that's also a great thing, right? So you can be super, super sure, have something to back that up, of course. If you're super sure on what you want to do, be able to back it up. And this doesn't have to be, something super, super, crazy pie in the sky dream, right? You don't have to say, well, I want to be pre-med because I want to cure cancer, or I want to be pre-med because, I have done all this work and I started a nonprofit and I did all of these. Like, this is the biggest question I get. I have students come to me and say, well, do I need to start a company? Do I need to found something, right? You don't need to be that person. If you are that person, that's awesome. But if you are forcing yourself to be that person because you feel like you need to be, that will also shine through in an application and in an interview. So it's awesome if you are sure of what you want to do and you have done something amazing, or you have super, super big goals, but it can also be very simple. What you want to do in your experiences. You could say, I want to be pre-med because I have a family member who has been sick before with X, Y, and Z, and it really impacted me as a person. Right. And so it can be just something like that hits very close to home. If you can speak to your experiences and what you've done and what your experiences have been that have led you to wanting to do this major, that's important. I think the biggest piece of advice I give is just be honest and don't be disingenuous, and don't feel like you have to fit into a mold. Because I think that's when some students get in trouble, when they start to, say things and do things to make their application look better, but it's not actually who they are or what they're interested in. And then again, if you're the person who doesn't know what you want to do, be honest and say that. And then obviously give a few examples of some things you might be interested in and sort of what led you to that as well.
Well done.
Anything else to add here, Darryl?
I don't want to mess up that answer. What do we got next?
All right, school specific questions.
All right. This kind of, sort of dives into that, if you're following me before on the, where are you from? Where do you want your life to go? How will our school help you get there? These questions sort of, circle around, those types of investigation. Why do you want to go to this college? And I pick on a couple schools, right? I want to go to this college because it has an open curriculum and I've got a super open mind and I've got so many things I want to study and that speaks to me. Or I want to go to this college because it has a core curriculum that's going to make sure that I am well trained across, a whole different set of knowledge, right? They're trying to find out that you've not stalked them, but have done your research, know about the academics, know about the culture, know about sort of what's going on there. So the kind of clubs and organizations that exist, right? Having some knowledge about those kind of things, right? If there's classes that you're excited about taking, right? And this is, again, for those who've done special, every place has psych courses and English courses and econ courses, but, schools do have classes or schools of, or faculty members that they're especially proud of, or that they might cite in their work, or that you may have just discovered because you're super excited about something that they teach. Being able to share that gives really good insight into one of the things Dominique said on a couple of times, demonstrated interest, right? You demonstrate your interest before the interview, right? You demonstrate your interest by getting on their website, researching their information, looking at the stuff that you might want to study, so that when you arrive at this interview, you're demonstrating your interest, right? In the way that you articulate it. How do you believe you'll positively contribute to the college? That's the impact, that you want to make. And that's something, again, you're going to be asked a lot in college essays. So talk about the way in which you've made an impact in your current community and how you'd like to continue that, in your new community, or maybe something you've foregone doing in your community so far that you can't wait to do in this new place because they super encourage terms abroad study, or they super encourage going into the neighboring community and teaching, right? You're like, I've never tutored anybody, right? They'll make me do that, right? I like the way in which they encourage students to do things outside the comfort zone. And then what initially drew you to apply to a college? That's a great question to be able to answer, right? It's also a great question to ask your interviewer, right? What drew them to the place, but be able to tell them why you're interested and maybe essentially why you first, found out about the school. And it doesn't have to be super sophisticated. Hey, I saw you on TV. My aunt went here. I grew up down the street, right? Be able to tell them how you first discovered it and make it authentic.
Dominique, any thoughts here before we move on? And I think we're going to talk a little bit about how you will contribute to a college if you're accepted.
Yeah, I would love to just jump into the next slide. I think that's like the biggest question here that we haven't, we have touched upon it, but I think it just requires a little bit more of a deep dive, of course. So I would say big thing here, again, it doesn't have to be, I'm going to come here and I'm going to fix everything or change everything, pie in the sky. I'm going to start this club. I'm going to start this organization. It can literally be like, I researched your school and, I'm interested in education. And I see you have, as a club I was in is Students for Education Reform, right? I'd love to join that club, understand the local community a little bit more, work in some of the schools and just kind of see where that takes me, right? Just a specific example of something that you saw online or in a brochure or on a tour or something like that can really go a long way. Also being able to point to, this is another great way to highlight some of the things that you're showing in your application. You can only write so much about your kind of high, I guess like your biggest extracurricular activities and things you've been involved in. And so this is just another place to verbalize, here is what I've been involved in the past. Here are ways that I've contributed to my communities in the past. And here's how I want to carry that over. Whether it's, I want to use, what I've learned in my high school club to transfer over here, or, I've been a leader at my high school and I've been a positive role model to younger students. And I want to do something similar here. Whatever you've done in the past that's leading you to want to have this impact at the college, just highlight that again. That's really, really helpful because another small piece of advice to you all is that alumni interviewers, at least, have not oftentimes seen your application. We're given very, very limited information. And I don't think that's something that's necessarily obvious. I think when you're sitting on the other side of it, you assume that person who you probably look up to because they've gone to the school that you want to go to and they're an adult and they have a job and all of these things. And you think they know everything about me. They're talking constantly with the admissions office. That's not true. We're really given very limited information. We're told where you're from and how to get in touch with you, right? And I think that's purposeful in a lot of ways, that schools really want us to just get to know who you are as a person and not go in with any preconceived notions of who you are based on what you're like on paper. But it also may require a little bit of explaining where you're coming from, even if you did write a lot about this in your essay or in your resume portion or anything like that. So yeah, I think I covered everything there. I know it was a lot.
Got it. I think you got it.
Yeah. Darryl, awesome. Anything else here?
She got it.
All right. Yeah. Strengths and weaknesses. This is always,
all right,
in my opinion, the hardest for me to answer. I'm sure for a lot of people.
Yeah, this is again, this you're kind of revealing who you are in this particular set of questions. And again, you want to be thoughtful about all your answers. And like Dominique said, take some time to think about your responses. Be thoughtful in your answers. So the weaknesses, I think when you're discussing your weaknesses, I think you want to be honest, but not too honest. I think you want to talk about a weakness that you're you're hoping to turn into a strength or that you're working on. You don't want to say, hey, look, I just can't get anything turned in on time. I'm super late with everything. I'm just the latest. I'm the latest student in my class, right? You might want to highlight, a different, I'm someone who, if I'm not turned on by the subject, I'm not as inspired. So I need a core curriculum, so I'm forced to take other things, or I don't need a core curriculum. I need an open curriculum so that I can, my weakness is I excel in the areas where I'm super interested, and I'm not as inspired, right, in the areas where I'm not as, right? That's a good weakness to present. I'm the most tardy student in my senior class. Not a weakness you want to reveal, right? What would you say is your greatest strength? And I think it is important to have academic strengths and to present those. However, your interview is a personal interview, and your academic strengths, I think they're getting an opportunity to ascertain those through your application and other things. When they ask about your greatest strength, I think offer them one of the things that as a person, you think is a particularly good characteristic of yours, right? And it can be I'm a good team player, right? I'm empathetic. Mine is, I love public speaking. Like, I'll go and give the message to the masses. It doesn't scare me at all, right? So think about something that you're super good at, and know that this is a time in terms of self-advocacy. We don't want you to be too bombastic, but humility is not your strong card here. When you're talking about your strength, tell them the thing that you do that makes the places that you go to better. All right, how do you strive to cover your weaknesses? What is your process? Wow, they're going deep, right? So they're asking you, if you have things that are challenges, maybe, how do you strive to cover them, but also how do you strive to improve them, right? So talk about your process of self-awareness. Look, I know sometimes I'm late with my work, so I've become a super big scheduler, right? I know sometimes I don't understand other people's feelings, so I've had to join a lot more clubs that have sort of represented people who aren't like me, so I know what the heck everyone else is uncomfortable about, so that I can be more empathetic, right? Talk about things that you're doing to make yourself better. How do you implement changes to continually grow? Again, I think that's something that we all are doing, right? Self-reflection, reading, right? Meditating, right? Taking credit for the things we do well, right? Taking the hits for the things that we're responsible for doing not so badly, not so well, right? So talk about, again, just the things that you're doing that are authentically the stuff you do. If you're not running 5 miles a day, don't tell them about the 5-mile run a day, right? Tell them about the, walk around the block a day that you're doing to stay fit.
Great. I think we're going to dive into the weakness question a little bit more here.
So Darryl, I think you did a great job with this one already, so I'm not going to add too much more.
Okay.
I think my 2 cents here is just kind of like what it says on the slide. Of course, be candid, pick something that you can work on that, again, isn't going to poke a huge hole in your application, but also isn't like fake, like, oh, I'm too nice, or I'm too organized, or, perfectionism. I was actually just reading something on LinkedIn the other day about people using the perfectionism thing as their big weakness. I would not say that, because it just seems like a little bit of a humble brag to me. And I think other people get that same idea. So really just something, that truly you could work on, but isn't like end of the world. Like, I'm late to class every day and I don't care about things, and etc. So we really did cover that. But I think even the most impressive thing that you can do here when asked about your weakness is talk about it and then immediately dive into, here is actually what I'm doing to fix this. Or here's the ways I've sought out feedback from my teachers or from my mentors, my coaches, to help me with this. And here's the ways I've reflected upon this. So if you can go into that without them having to ask, and what are you doing to change it? I think that just shows a ton of self-awareness. And again, self-awareness is something that I think goes a long way with college admissions. Colleges want to know that they're admitting adults that are going to work very, very hard to change that campus, to change the world, and to be, these very successful people, but that are also continuously trying to improve themselves and aren't, under any impression of being, perfect or the best at anything, that they're just, people who are, I think their hearts are in the right place and they are talented enough to make those impacts on the community.
Darryl, anything else here?
We got it. We tag team that one. We got that one good.
All right. Tell me about a time.
Tell me about a time. Yeah. This is again, I think one of those questions you kind of encounter in, if not the Common App prompts, some of the prompts that you see on supplemental essays, right? Tell me a time you've overcome a challenge or an obstacle, right? I think that's taken from the Common App, right? Tell me about a time you've had a disagreement with someone. How did you resolve this issue, right? Tell me about a time you did something that might not have been popular, but you thought it was the right thing to do, right? They're always about impact, but these are questions that are trying to tease you out about how have you made certain choices, right? So when you've had an obstacle, did you choose to lay down or did you choose to get up and brush yourself off and then become a champion, right? If you've had a disagreement with someone, was it a fight or were you able to make it a dialogue with two people with opposing views, right? Tell me about something you've done that may not have been popular, but that you thought was the right thing to do, right? I think that's something to explore. Tell me about a time you failed. What did you do after, right? And I think that's a fair question to ask everybody, right? And then tell me about a time that you worked as a team. You had to work as a team, right? So all of these are sort of examples about, again, if we think about that sort of 3-chapter, where are you from, right? This is kind of falls into the where are you from, right? Tell me about something that happened in the past and how did you deal with an obstacle, a disagreement, not being the most popular person in the room at the time, failing, or having to join the team. Right?
All right.
Let's see what we have. What they have lined up for us, Doc.
All right. We can dive into the obstacle question a little bit more, and then we'll move on to the last couple slides.
Okay, so I love this question a lot. I think, I keep saying colleges really want self-aware people that are reflecting, continuously trying to make themselves better, which is obviously super important. But another thing I would say is colleges don't want, I've also said this, the perfect person, the person that knows everything, more than just knowing everything. What they're really looking for and really looking to teach you is problem solving skills, right? So at the end of the day, they want the person that can come in, think about something, solve a problem, figure it out, and go through that whole iterative process, not just be this like perfect person that never struggles. And so if you can showcase those problem solving skills, how do you, look at a goal or even start by setting a goal for yourself, do something, potentially fail at it, look at how you did, ask for help is another way, again, that you show that humility and that human side of you, all the better will be your answer. And again, your impression on this person as a human being. At the end of the day, the alumni interviewer is just a human being and they're trying to get to know you. There's very, very limited context for who you are once again. And so your 4.0 GPA, your perfect SAT score, all of those things are going to be unbeknownst most of the time. Again, I'm speaking again from the lens of the alumni interviewer to the person. And so if you can show who you are and have that speak for itself, the whole picture will really come together when the alumni interviewer is submitting their notes, and they can really just say, hey, I don't know what grades this person has, but they are really a problem solver. They really clearly reflect on who they are. They really clearly want to be a better person. I would recommend them as a human being. Hopefully their academics and the things that they've done and their test scores and their kind of academic at least their like objective academic ability lines up, but here's what I know about them as a person.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that context of, thinking about the goal of the interview to some extent, being what kind of impression do I want to leave, but really what do I hope is communicated about me from that conversation, from this person I've met. I think that's super important to highlight. That's great, Dominique. That's great.
All right, so we're going to go through some miscellaneous questions. We're not going to do any examples here. And then we'll talk about some tips, and then we'll go into Q&A. So we'll keep this one fairly short and sweet.
All right. I'll just read them. If you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would you choose? I got mine. What do you think about recent current events? Lots of those going on. What book are you reading right now? None. I've just finished writing a bunch of college recommendations. If you were transformed into an animal, what would it be? Whoa.
Do one of you want to speak to kind of the thoughts behind the miscellaneous questions that don't necessarily seem to relate back to academics or school admissions?
Sorry, go ahead.
I think the first one talks about who do you admire, right? That's your sort of, who's your, not idol, but who do you admire? Who are you interested in?
Yeah, just in general, I think these questions, sometimes it's like, whoa, where did that come from? What do you mean? What kind of animal do I want to be? Right. But at the end of the day, it gets down to like your values, and who you are as a person. And I think even more so, just intellectual curiosity, right? What book are you reading? Are you reading the news? Are you, taking these things in and like thinking critically about the world around us? Or are you just sitting in class and trying to get, 100 on everything that's put in front of you, which again is important, right? The grades are important, but they really want to know outside of your classes, are you demonstrating that curiosity, like just about the world in general? And that's actually one of the main buckets. And so when we're asked, and again, this is specific to Dartmouth, when we're asked to review a student, intellectual curiosity is one of the buckets, one of the 4 main buckets that we're asked to rate the applicants on and kind of talk about and write some notes about. And I'm not getting your grades, I'm not getting your transcript, right? Where we might talk a little bit about your classes, but this is oftentimes where I'm getting that information from. They talked about this book, they're really loving, they're really interested in, X, Y, and Z specific thing. They're talking about these current events. That's when I can see that you really are just an engaged citizen, when it is a little bit more off the cuff than just like, what's your favorite class? What have you done in school?
Great. Tips for acing the interviews.
We'll just switch off. Understanding the common questions, right? And we've gone over, a lot of them. So being able to, know that you're going to be asked about your background, you're going to be asked about your interests, you're going to be asked about sort of what you're doing outside the classroom. So understand that there's a kind of a canon of questions that you're likely to be asked.
Prepare, but do not over rehearse. I mentioned this before. You don't want to sound like a robot. You want to sound like you are a human being that has cared a whole lot about this, and you are smart and you're articulate and you have worked hard to prepare and you really like want to put your best foot forward here. But you also do want to just show that you're a human and have a conversation, because at the end of the day, that's what this is. And it should really feel like a conversation. Let me learn more about you. You are there to impress them. But they also need to impress you. It needs to be a good fit, which is very, very key. And you can really figure out pretty quickly from having that one-on-one conversation if the school is a good fit for you or not.
Outline your answers on paper to practice. And I'd say, yeah, you definitely want to practice, see if someone might answer you, ask you some sample questions and see your agility with them. But I think as you go into the interview, the one piece of paper I would suggest that you bring, if you have a resume, sometimes your interviewer might like that, and you can almost guarantee which questions you're going to be asked during your interview, right? They're gonna maybe look at those things and sort of see, hey, this is something I'd like to know more about. So both practice, right? So you're ready for this, but also if you have information that you might be able to provide to them, that might be helpful in the interview setting.
Number 4, be professional and friendly. Remember to smile. Again, be a human being. I can't stress this enough. Show the interviewer that you are confident, that again, being professional can mean a lot of things. Make sure you're dressed nicely, make sure that you're on time, all of those different things, just to show that you really are trying to put your best foot forward and this really matters to you and their time is really valued here. You go a long way.
Yep. And the practice, I think I jumped forward that on number 3. Practice, have your teacher, your parent, a friend, sort of just, you don't have to sort of do a formal, walk into the room, dress up for the interview, but, practice some of the questions, sort of, get the taste in your mouth of describing yourself, get the taste in your mouth of talking about why you might want to study X, Y, or Z. And that'll just help you, like with other things, just have some comfort when you go into the venue.
Already touched on this one. This is again, professionalism. Be early, make sure your Zoom's working, all of those things. It just, again, it leaves such a good or negative, unfortunately, first impression, right? If you are just not there and the person's waiting for you, those seconds feel like they tick by really slowly, right? And so it won't stress you out too. The worst thing in the world is showing up to something late and then being all frazzled because you already feel like you're starting off on the wrong foot. So just set yourself up for success so you can go into it stress-free by being extra early and know exactly where you need to be.
And this is one of those things, I mean, I've often heard people say to me, hey, Darryl, this isn't about you. This interview is about you, right? So make sure when you get there, you introduce yourself sort of proudly and confidently, and make sure to find out who they are, ask them about themselves. And, as you're wrapping it up, let them know that you appreciate the time that you spent with them, that they volunteered their time to spend with you, and that you appreciate the insight and the amount of information they shared about their life experience at that school, especially if they're an alumni who's sort of doing it out of the kindness of their heart.
Fantastic. Let's dive into a Q&A.
All right.
See, we have a question. Someone would love for us to elaborate a little bit more on the animal question. And I think that was if you could be any animal, what animal would you be and why? Do either of you have any thoughts on specifically that question or questions kind of like it? What the ultimate goal is there? Is there a right or wrong answer?
Yeah, those questions I think on purpose are kind of open-ended, just to find out what you might say, right? Because the choices there's so many choices, there can't really be an animal they're looking for unless it's their mascot, right? So that is one that they're really just trying to make you think. It's kind of like, tell me about Wednesday, right? Those questions that just, if it looks like, hey, there's not a empirically correct answer to that question, then they're asking you to think outside the box.
Yeah, I mean, I would just dive into of course, I think we might want to read into this a little bit. Again, this is going to be like a very rare question. I wouldn't prepare necessarily for this question, but if someone were to ask this question, like if I were to ask this question, I might just want to add like a lighthearted question into the mix. This is, as a teacher and as an administrator, I do this a lot with students, just like an icebreaker question. But also it can just tell you just a little bit about, someone. You could run with this and say, here's an animal that I want to be because I admire its strength, or I admire, a certain trait about the animal, and I want to be more like that. And so again, I don't think I would read too much into it or prepare too much for something like this, but you may get a crazy question. Don't be afraid to say, hey, great question. I haven't really thought of that. Give me a second. That can also totally work.
Great. Next question we have is, are you a freshman? If you're a freshman or sophomore with some time left to build your resume, what would you recommend doing or generally participating in? And I'm going to start off this answer before I'm going to dive in first here and say, we recently did a webinar on extracurriculars, and we have others that kind of cover this topic in a bunch of different ways. So feel free to go onto our website and onto our webinars page. You can view our old webinars for free. With that said, though, Darryl and Dominique would love for you to just give a brief answer to this as well.
Okay. Dominique, you want to go first, and I'll follow up?
Yeah, I can start. And so a big thing, the biggest advice that I give to students is you really want to demonstrate, you know, the four things that we are told as alumni interviewers to look for. And I have this pulled up in front of me. I don't want to mess it up. So I'm just gonna read them, right? So we have intellectual engagement, we have commitment to and motivation and activities, we have personal character, and then the why Dartmouth question, or the why whatever school question. I think this is pretty common for most schools. And so, you know, do the things that you're interested in. As a freshman, you have a ton of time to really figure out what you're interested in. And so do the things that you're interested in, explore. You want to demonstrate by the time your 4 years are up that you are intellectually curious and engaged, that you've had an impact on your community in some way. And, you know, that can take a whole bunch of different forms, right? And so that can be, I played basketball for 4 years and I became the team captain and I fundraised for the team. And, you know, I was that person on my basketball team. And that can also be, you know, I was on the science quiz bowl team, which is something I did. And, you know, I was someone who was involved in starting, you know, a certain competition or something like that. So it isn't what you do. It's really just how you have an impact on the community and how you also show. One of the things I mentioned was motivation in those activities. And so it's not about what you do. It's really just showing that you're doing something that you care about and you're having an impact on the community that you're doing it with.
Fantastic. And Dominique, can you repeat those 4 questions that you just said, just for people to get?
Yeah. And so these aren't questions. Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
The buckets, I think they were questions.
Yeah. Yeah, so they are really just the 4 buckets that we, again, this is specific to Dartmouth. I assume that it is similar, but I'm transparent with the students I work with. So we're looking again for intellectual engagement and curiosity. We are looking for commitment and motivation in activities, your character. So how have you sort of impacted the communities around you? And then again, the why Dartmouth. Have you demonstrated that you specifically are interested in our school?
Great. Darryl, I'll give you this question. Is it okay to mention some extracurricular achievements in questions like what do you do during your free time? Or would that sound like you're using the question to brag?
No, that's exactly what they mean by free time. They mean they kind of mean your non-academic doing schoolwork time, right? So the time that you're sort of free to use as you like. But yeah, they absolutely mean sort of what purposeful things are you doing with your time? What kind of extracurricular jobs, athletics, what have you? And so long as you're filling up that answer with purposeful things, I think it's okay to love playing video games, love walking my dog, but make sure you're letting them know that a lot of your free time is being used, making an impact, following your passions. But yeah, you should certainly be giving them your resume in that free time question.
This is the time you want to show off your strengths. I think that both Darryl and Dominique can speak to this, but this is a time for you to brag in a lot of ways and talk about how amazing you are.
Yeah. One of the things I say about the interview, so and again, you don't get the opportunity to interview everywhere, but so much of the application, absolutely all of the college application is about things who you were, right? Your interview literally tells them who you are right now. And I think that's a super powerful crossroads for them to get to know you, right? They're getting lots of historical data about you in your application, where in your interview, you can tell them who you are right now. And to the extent there's stuff that's happened in the past that you'd like to have better clarity shine upon, again, you get to tell them who you are now in your interview.
It's a great way to look at it. I think we are over time right now.
Whoa.
I want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. Dominique, Darryl, thank you both for your insights. It was a pleasure having you. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We're going to send out an email in the coming days that has a link to this webinar recording. If you're interested in quad education services, feel free to schedule a consultation on our website, send us an email, give us a call, and we can discuss how we can help you. You can work with people like Darryl and Dominique. And good luck on your college application journey. I hope everyone has a really great night and rest of your week. Again, Darryl and Dominique, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you all for being here.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.